I guess this is my second attempt. I did too many pictures, so I ran out of room the first time. So anyway, this actually really bugs me. So I was watching The Quartering after sending Munchkin down for his nap, and so obviously I don't have much longer, because, yeah. Anyway, I also watched Tim Pool. He's an independent reporter. Really good. He's not been researching his stuff as well as normal lately. But he's also been pretty open about that, and he's leaving it open that, he hasn't been able to look into it, so it may or may not be true, but if it is, it's fucked up. In some cases. But, The Quartering has a pretty good track record for, knowing what they're talking about. And if they don't, they'll be like, hey, yep, we completely admit that, we made a mistake. And that's part of it, A lot of... He sent the story, and he was able to confirm it. And he released it. And I would on it, and there were people who were even blaming the person who came forward. I guess this guy worked on Kingdom Hearts 3. And he was harassed by someone in a position of power above him who happened to be a woman. Here's the thing. This shit happens in America too. And while the whole beat up by people on the street thing might not happen here, some of the other stuff does too. What distressed me was the reaction people had on the internet to it. These people just assume that anything bad that they hear on the internet is just a lie. And I'm like, no, actually, there's a lot of true stuff out there, and they're just like, if it's... You have to understand that there are some things you can't see all the documentation to. It is literally against the law in some cases. In others, certain details you can't release, either to protect the victims or because someone is using something meant to protect actual victims as, a loophole of sorts. There are other things that go on, you're not necessarily, you can find these clauses if you actually look, but a lot of these people are saying, oh, there's not enough evidence, and he's like, well, I can't. He's reading it verbatim, and he's leaving out, identifying information so that this doesn't destroy the person's life, and, he's being completely open about that he would never work in the industry again, especially in Japan. And Japan... I know as a kid I had this really idealistic view of it, and I still think that one day I would like to see the sakura blossoms, maybe draw a shrine or something in person, but I would never want to live there. Beyond the fact that they have spiders that are enough to scare the living daylights out of me, that make the camel spider look like an innocent creature. The what? I've heard stories from people who have visited Japan, and I'm just like, yeah? Beyond stuff like that, there's this attitude and this saying that they go by, that the nail that sticks up gets hammered down. If you stand out, boom, you need to be made to stick in. They even make school children dye their hair black. Natural Japanese people, native people to Japan do not only have black hair. Many of them have brown hair. And those who are born with brown hair, it is believed to basically be dirty, lesser, and you have to dye your hair black, or maybe your hair isn't black enough, I guess, as far as everybody's concerned. You will be pressured to dye it, I would never survive is if I had to have my hair black all the time. Because even back whenever I was younger and I used to dye it black, it would lighten like so quickly. And dye was so incredibly hard on my hair. Um, I would basically eventually end up losing my hair. And they don't even let up on people who have actual medical problems that can make them go bald. They can just destroy their hair. They will dictate what length you can have at certain schools, they get into it. And it seems wow, but then you need to look at like our own country where they tell people that have curly hair that they have to straighten it. And then you've got like generations of people where this has been the case for actually quite a long time. So this isn't actually revolutionary. It's been done to people for a long time. So you have paler skinned people who don't even know that their poofy hair is actually curly. But it's just been trained their entire lives because you're not allowed to have curly hair in school. And sometimes it just doesn't come up for so long because people just sort of followed it. And now, it's sort of cropped up again, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to agree with it. I think it should change. You shouldn't be on people for quote-unquote natural hair. It's your hair. It's part of your body. Requiring you to straighten it and damage it in order to fit in is the same thing as requiring you to get a body piercing or do anything else to your body that nobody has any business telling you to do. So it's one of those things, you can do that if you want, but nobody should be forcing you to. But in Japan, they'll do stuff like that. So it's actually not unbelievable. There's also the fact that, our countries actually share some flaws. Corruption in the courts would be definitely one of them. Oh, it definitely would. You see, in Japan, failure is not really seen as an option. So if they don't have the answer to a case, they will fudge it. So for them, it's a matter of pride. In America, officials are just greedy and have basically sold their souls for money. The motivations can be different, but it's not actually all that different. The result is pretty much the same. As you can see with these companies where they're now being money motivated, they don't want to admit that they've been wrong. So he did all this research, and all these people are having the same reaction that happens when, it's what I went through. The same types of things that I heard when, I was reaching out because of what was happening to my kids and I. I had that old channel, Dark Lady in the Moon, that got hacked so many times. Just speaking out, to this day, I don't even have access to the Facebook. The last time I was able to get back into the Facebook that I had during that time, I made every picture in it public. Just because I could not even, because back then, before everything happened, I used to back up all my photos of my kids, or as many as I could upload anyway, onto Facebook. I used to back them up on Facebook. I didn't know about Shutterfly back then. So, yeah. I went in there and I made everything public. I still have not been able to get into my old Google accounts though. And that was the screen name, Dark Lady in the Moon. I used to dye my hair black, and I was talking about what was going on. And I was actually completely open about it too. All aspects, including that, some of what I was doing was reflective of the past and not the present. Because, I was going through and I was coping with both. Because I was still going through dealing with the past while I was having to deal with these massive amounts of triggers going on. And make no mistake, this was actually a pretty big one for me. And I was walking, and I was even talking about that was it, and just, it was a mess. And, people form this idea that there's only so much bad that can happen to one person, like there's a limit to it, and there's not. I actually ran into that. People sort of come to this point where they believe that there's a limit to how much bad can happen to you. There's no limit. There's no limit to how much good can happen to you. There's no limit to how much bad can happen to you. These are fictional things. Unfortunately, the reactions that were in the comment section there for the Quarterings video is not new to me. Some people, you can show them all the proof in the world and they will not believe you, and other people, they will do everything that they can to destroy you, to destroy the proof. There was entire pieces of it were taken down that I did not remove. There were things that I had to make private because my lawyer was like, oh, well, this will just piss off the judge. Things that were blatantly recordings, video recordings, audio. I had all this stuff on there, proof of what was happening. And some of it, just part of it recorded, part of it didn't, and some of it, you could hear and you could discern. And you were like, oh my God. And I was told that this would piss somebody off. Nowadays, I would just be like, good. But, I was in my early 20s and I didn't know any better. At that age, I still thought that, if you talked about it enough, that someone would hear and maybe do something. And the only thing that happened was, it was nothing. People do so many terrible, horrible things. And in Arizona, you can lose your kids and they have nothing. They aren't even accusing you of anything. They'll just say that eventually you'll do something. We know somebody who lost his kids and was convicted of, I think it was neglect, based on, they just said that the environment wasn't good for children. That was it. And that was actually a criminal charge, just for environment. They weren't accusing them of arguing or anything specific, really, just environment. And then they made religion a big deal. See, this sort of stuff really gets me. That stuff actually happens. And you spend the rest of your life trying to make sense of it. And then, if you do make sense of it, you spend the rest of your life trying to figure out why, how, what makes someone do this? What makes someone feel like they can be so evil? And you know what? The reaction, though, that a lot of people who haven't been through it, until it happens to them, that's the reaction. They bend over backwards to not believe it. And they will even ignore things that are right in front of them to do so. And a lot of the people in that comment section were doing exactly that. And I was just like, wow, this is just like this. And, I've also seen it a lot with other people's stuff. Other people, I've seen the paperwork. And I know that they're not saying anything that's even bad. And other people who it's in the paperwork, but also there's proof that they didn't and that they're lying. Actual proof. Proof that the people saying it lack completely because it didn't happen. This shit happens. People sort of form this idea that something that happens outside of what is meant to work a certain way just can't happen. And that's a lie. That's a lie that people tell themselves because they have characters that are too weak to handle it. They either become stronger because they have to, or forced to face it because one day it happens to them too, or, In Japan, though, they have a shitty view of all sexual assault. They have generally the same views towards women that they do towards men, have blacklisted women for coming forward, and this guy, if he did that, he would be blacklisted. If he's not already. I mean, if he's still working in the industry, he's not, I guess. But see, that's the thing. Japan has a really shitty way of handling sexual assaults and abuses of power involving sexual assault to begin with, regardless of gender. I mean, there's already corruption behind what is going on. This is a symptom, not the cause. Kind of like how what happens here with the family court stuff, and with CPS and all that, and families that shouldn't even have them involved have been ripped to pieces, and families that, and situations where they should have been involved, they're not because they're so busy harassing people they have no business doing this to. All for funding because, that's how that works. And, there are ways to prove that. And you can actually prove that. But, there's always some idiot who, even after you've proven it, is like, yeah, right. You probably did this and this and this. They do so many mental backflips to accuse you of basically jury rigging it that they're, and you're just like, I'm sorry, did you just accuse me of having the skills of 15 different fields just so that you could justify how I must have conspired to fake this? Could you please listen to what you're saying first before you say it? Some people, the level that they will go to when this has not even happened to them, just because it's not happened to them, it just can't happen in their mind, they will go through some shit. They will just sort of build this bubble where this can't happen, and they refuse to accept that this can happen. Rather than growing a goddamn pair, facing the fact that it has happened, and helping to fix it so that it stops happening. You would not believe the number of people who will admit that it's happened, will admit that it's happening, and won't do a goddamn thing towards changing it. Some of them will even go so far as to try and justify it. They will try and say, oh, but it has to be this way, or that it has always been this way, even though it hasn't, it really hasn't. Nothing has always been this way. You cannot even say, oh, well, we have always had bones. Nope. Because if you go far back enough in evolution, even that wouldn't be true. Because every piece of life on this planet actually evolved from, Anyway. You go far back enough and you can't even say that like that. So, there's nothing new under the sun, but also nothing has always been this way, and that is both the weak that should be seen as the weakest excuse, but it's surprisingly how much people use it. It is also, however, one of the more dangerous things that people say. It is an excuse and an acknowledgement in one. It means that they don't have any invested interest in changing it. They're making an excuse to not change it, to leave it just the way that it is, under the excuse that it's always been that way. Why would you change it? It's always been that way. And that's what's dangerous about it. And a lot of officials here won't even admit to the stuff that has happened for being pagan. They'll talk about what happens to Muslims. But the stuff that happens to you for being pagan or for having any sort of mental health diagnosis whatsoever, they don't talk about the stuff. And you're actually treated as less than a human being in a lot of situations. If you have either one of those things, God has help you if it's both. And for me, it was both, because I have PTSD, which isn't scary enough, so I guess they also had to claim that I, had mysteriously hidden this other disorder from people. This disorder that would mean that I wouldn't have any sort of long-term relationship whatsoever, any relationship, that I wouldn't agonize over literally anything that I agonize over, that literally my entire life would never have happened. Yeah, that sort of thing. The guy didn't even finish the psych eval. He just did it. But that's actually pretty common. In fact, it's advised that if you can afford to get your own, get your own. And there's actual paperwork where they have complained, CPS has complained, whenever somebody does have the money to do it, or manages to borrow from family to get it, an actual supportive family, to get their own. And they've actually put it in the paperwork, in one particular case that I'm thinking of. This person, by the way, did actually lose their children, and they did not get to come home. Their complaint to the fact that, they had gotten their own person was that they didn't get any input in the findings. Yeah. When you go through the state, they're telling the doctor what they want said. Yeah. They have input in the results. And they know it. And it's not supposed to happen this way. But it happens enough that if you go outside of that, they're like, hey, wait a minute, we can't influence this. We want to be able to influence this. And that's actually happened to people. With me, I couldn't afford it. I tried, and I couldn't afford it. I couldn't find anything that I could do that with, and my insurance wouldn't cover, doing it either. I did try. I went through every avenue that I could, and it was just not humanly possible. Sometimes it isn't. And I did try. I've never stopped trying. Anyway, you run into the same sorts of comments. I even ran into people where I would show them the proof. They would have the recordings, the paperwork, everything in front of them, and they would still be doing mental backflips. I believe I already said that, but yes, let me just say this again. Mental backflips. The fuckery that goes on with that is just stunning. And I still run into it. Even knowing that we had to prove that it was absolute shit for me to be approved to co-parent and be alone with Chris 4 years ago. So, by the way, he's thriving now. He's taking a nap currently. It's going to be time for me to get him up soon. I only make him take a nap for about an hour anymore. It gives him a second wind. Unless he's, like, especially in need of it and fighting it, and then it might go on for, like, a little bit longer than that. But he doesn't need a lot. He just needs enough to kind of revitalize him. And he did some extra stuff today because he's trying to have less schoolwork to do tomorrow. Because we pace it and, kind of break it up. And he is ahead, but I told him that if he wants to stay a week ahead, he has to finish next week's schoolwork before next week. And he's actually only got, like, a handful of assignments left. But there's this one that he jumped on, and I'm thinking to myself, I know what's going to happen here. Because he hates these assignments. It's an actual writing assignment. He has to write a whole freaking paragraph after reading this and thinking about it and considering, and he hates that. Like, Chris is no. So he's sitting there trying to get me to spell out all the words he wants to say, and he's smirking at me, and I'm just like, I ain't doing this for you. And, had he done this, I told him, if you manage to do this, I'll give you ice cream. And, he didn't. He started, having his issues, and, I was like, well, that's the part that I can do. I did at first try to redirect him, but, like, it was more like a tentative, are you sure you don't want to pick a different one? And I also told him that if he gets it done before Friday, or if he gets stuff done really early on Friday, we'll do more of the sewing, because he really likes the sewing for some reason, and he wanted to, immediately he wanted to jump into the one thing that I'm not very good at. I can make patterns and all sorts of stuff. I cannot embroider worth a damn. I am shit at embroidery. I have tried. I'm self-taught. So I pulled up some YouTube videos and started doing the tutorials next to him. He has renamed French knots pain in the butt knots. I fully support this. They are kind of a pain in the butt. Even if you do them right, you still have to, pull the thread at just the right moment in just the right place. Otherwise, you can end up with extra threads, and just it's too loose. All sorts of stuff. So anyway, yeah. I digress. It's really fucked up. And there were a lot of things that people said, there was some people in the comments were going, oh, why did you only send it here? They're missing what has already been said, that this person sent this to basically every Western journalist that they could think of. Not necessarily everyone, like Tim Pool and stuff, but the Quartering they do a lot of gaming stuff, gaming news, and they report on he reports on a lot of the different stuff that goes on in the gaming industry. As a gamer, I completely support this. Also, Bethesda is really shit right now. And at one point, I might have actually considered pre-ordering something whenever, I had money, and, yeah. They were a reputable company, meaning they actually put out good games and stuff, but these people are actually punishing people for running into these, glitches on accident. They're deleting accounts. They're just like, oh, you ran into a glitch in our game. They're punishing people for exploring the world, essentially, for playing the game that they put out. It's a really POS game. even if you don't think that about the game itself, the quality of it is POS. They've left all sorts of glitches. They've become like that, where, they've decided, I can get away with leaving all the shit in there. Either the modders will fix it or what, and then whenever they're like, oh, we're not going to let modders touch this, then they're like, oh, well, it's the gamer's fault for falling into these traps that we've left for them with our shitty ass shit. And I'm just like, and you're surprised? So now they're penalizing gamers who have YouTube accounts more so than those who don't. Coincidence? Anyway, a lot of shitty things go on in the world. And that's something that's currently going on. The quartering hasn't really covered all the details of it, but they can't really. So if you're like me though, you're usually informed about this stuff, or you can take, what goes on there and research it from there. I actually didn't really keep up with it as much before. Like, I didn't even know that Gamergate was even a thing until, like, there was already fallout from it. Until, like, it was already, like, people were raging about it, and I was like, what is this? Gamergate? What? Because I just sort of mind my own business, like most sane people in the world. So usually stuff has to get pretty big before I hear about it. Unless, I'm directly in the circle of people, who might hear about it, like, directly. Like, sorry, but my other tech friends, don't necessarily keep me up to date on all the culture stuff that goes on. And I don't ask. Because, frankly, I don't generally care. Unless it is something of a problem that we should all be worried about, or something bad has happened and someone needs help, I don't really care. And generally, stuff like that, most people I know have usually been like, oh no, you don't want to get involved in that. And I'm like, well, what? Why? Because I know you can't keep your mouth shut. First thing, I'd do would be I'd get involved in it and I'd piss a bunch of people off. And you can't do that whenever you're in the tech community, because the first time you piss off a hacker, they'll fuck up your shit. So, I've actually had people hack my shit, by the way, just because I've spoken out about things. And, it's not pleasant. And I don't imagine that I have some kind of hacker out there who's somehow decided, oh yes, everyone needs to see this. No, I've just gotten the attacks, I can't get into, like, whole entire groups of accounts. Their emails I'll never get back because I can't get into the accounts, I had an entire stream of this. And that's the thing. What people don't realize is that if the quartering shows certain information and certain things about what happened, certain proofs, if they show it to the viewers, they will destroy this guy. This guy who was harassed by some woman at work who held a higher position than him. And that's the thing. That's another thing. Like, in Japan, not a lot of women hold positions like that. They don't want to... Basically, all that did was make her one of the guys. Yeah. It sucks, but with people like that, the shittier they are, the more they relate to you. It's just bad. It's just lots and lots of bad. And I don't know what else to say. I mean, these issues, as far as I'm concerned, the reaction just bugs me. And it will always bug me. Because it's the same reaction that happened when what happened to me and my kids happened. And that's the thing, like, even people who have known you and who know that this is true, you know, they'll turn around and sometimes they just can't handle it. And there was someone who was particularly devastating who was like that with me. Someone I'd worked with for a number of years, and who had, at least to me, become like family in her importance. And whenever shit happened, the first thing she said was, "They can't do that." And I said, "Well, they are. Tell that to them. You know, tell that to them because they're doing this anyway." And her reaction was to just say and do nothing. As far as I know, to this day, she still holds that view of, I say they can't, so they can't, you know. And she actually went out of her way after she became someone, you know, higher up in her company. She tells people not to get involved with this stuff, even if they know that it's false. People can lose their jobs for standing up just whenever they see something like this happen. They can lose their jobs. And she's not the only one who's taken stances like that. It's wrong. It is morally and terribly wrong. It is horrible. But that was her reaction to things. I don't know if that's the company's stance, but I know that was her reaction to things. Some people will find ways around it in certain situations just because they're amazing people like that, and some people will not. Some people welcome the excuse because they're always looking for one. They welcome the excuse because they were never not looking for one to begin with. That is the sad truth of the world that we live in, and frankly, it could be your family on the line, your job, you know, your livelihood. Not just your job, but any job within that field. You know, it could be any job, period, within an area. It could be any number of things. It could be your health. It doesn't matter. There will always be people like that. Very weak people who you thought were stronger, but then ended up finding out were just going to let you down. So, whenever those people are strangers on the internet, don't be surprised whenever they're shit. There's a reason why, out of all the people that story was sent to, only one person in one company took a look at it and said, "You know what, I need to look at this further." Looked at it, verified it, and then was like, "Yeah, this is actually true. There's overwhelming evidence that this is actually true." And a lot of people never find that one person. Just imagine that. For many, many people, there's never that one who actually bothers. But there are these reactions. And it's exactly like that. See, oh, no, this can't possibly be real. Like, there's a limit on how much bad is allowed to happen. But there isn't. Because the world is actually a pretty shitty place. it's just one big pile of shit. And every once in a while, you find a gem in that pile of shit. But it's still a pile of shit.